As these repressed emotions emerge, the emotional collapse begins. You might find yourself repeating old patterns, seeking distractions, feeling guilty for not being productive, or even sabotaging new opportunities. This isn't a sign of weakness, it's your psyche's way of trying to protect you from the pain it has stored for so long. The more you resist, the more exhausted you become, trapped in a cycle where motivation feels impossible. Freud suggested that such repetitions are the mind's attempt to master past traumas, but without awareness, they only lead to more suffering. You might feel isolated, as if no one understands why you can't just snap out of it, and this isolation deepens the sense of being stuck in a place between who you were and who you could be. This emotional turmoil can manifest in physical ways too, like constant fatigue, headaches, or a general sense of heaviness that makes even small tasks feel overwhelming. It's as if your body is echoing the unrest in your mind, reminding you that ignoring these feelings only makes them stronger. In this state, you might withdraw from social interactions, fearing that others will judge your lack of enthusiasm or see you as broken. But this withdrawal isn't about being antisocial, it's a protective mechanism, a way to avoid further hurt while you grapple with the internal chaos. Over time, this can lead to a profound sense of loneliness, where you feel disconnected not just from others, but from yourself, as the person you thought you were starts to fade away. Recognizing this collapse is crucial, as it marks the point where the old ways of coping no longer work, forcing you to confront the truths you've been avoiding. Understanding this process is the turning point. When you realize that your lack of motivation is not a flaw, but a signal from your unconscious, everything shifts. It's your mind's way of saying that the old paths no longer serve you, and it's time to listen to the deeper truths you've ignored. This isn't about forcing yourself to feel motivated again. It's about honoring the pause, the silence, and the pain as part of your growth. Freud's insights remind us that true change comes from facing these hidden parts, not from covering them up with spiritual ideals. By acknowledging this, you start to see that the awakening didn't kill your motivation. It simply revealed what was always there, waiting to be healed. This moment of clarity can feel like a weight lifting, as if you're finally giving yourself permission to be imperfect and human. You might recall times in your life, perhaps from childhood, where you learned to push down your true feelings to survive. For instance, think of someone like Matthew, who as a boy always had to be strong for his family, burying his fears and desires until they became invisible chains. This moment of clarity can feel like a weight lifting, as if you're finally giving yourself permission to be imperfect and human. You might recall times in your life, perhaps from childhood, where you learned to push down your true feelings to survive. For instance, think of someone like Matthew, who as a boy always had to be strong for his family, burying his fears and desires until they became invisible chains. Or consider Angela, who grew up believing that showing vulnerability was a weakness, so she built a life of constant achievement to prove her worth. These stories aren't just memories, they are living parts of your unconscious, influencing every choice you make. When a spiritual awakening brings them to light, it's not destroying your drive, it's inviting you to rebuild it on a foundation of truth, not fear. This rebuilding starts with small steps, like allowing yourself to feel sad or angry without judgment, and recognizing that these emotions are messengers, not enemies. As you do this, you begin to untangle the knots of guilt and repetition, finding a new kind of motivation that comes from within, not from the need to escape or impress. It's a slow, often painful process, but it leads to a more authentic life where you're no longer controlled by the ghosts of your past. You might notice subtle changes, like feeling less anxious in situations that used to trigger you, or finding joy in simple moments that you once overlooked. This isn't about achieving some grand state of enlightenment. It's about the quiet courage to sit with your discomfort and learn from it. Over time, this self-awareness can transform your relationships, your work, and how you see yourself, moving you from a place of reaction to one of conscious choice. Remember, this isn't a race or a test. It's your unique path to reclaiming the parts of you that were lost or forgotten, piece by piece, in the gentle light of understanding. Now, let's look at how this understanding plays out in everyday life, where the unconscious quietly shapes your actions without you even noticing. You might find yourself in situations that feel strangely familiar, like arguments that repeat the same old patterns or choices that lead back to the same dead ends. This isn't coincidence. It's your mind replaying old scripts from a time when you felt powerless or afraid. For example, imagine someone like John, who always ends up in jobs where he feels unappreciated, just like he did as a child when his efforts went unnoticed. Or think of Sarah, who keeps attracting partners who are emotionally distant, mirroring the lack of connection she felt growing up. These repetitions aren't failures, they are cries for attention from parts of you that were hurt long ago. Freud called this the repetition compulsion, where we unconsciously recreate past pains in the hope of finally mastering them. But without awareness, it only deepens the wound, leaving you stuck in a loop of frustration and confusion. You might start to see how your lack of motivation is tied to these cycles. Perhaps you avoid starting new projects because you fear they'll end in disappointment, or you hold back in relationships to protect yourself from being hurt again. This fear isn't irrational. It's rooted in real experiences that taught you to be cautious. As you become more aware of these patterns, you can begin to trace them back to their origins, often in childhood, where the seeds of your current struggles were planted. It's in those early moments that you learned what it means to be safe, loved, or worthy, and those lessons continue to guide you, even when they no longer serve you. By recognizing this, you take the first step toward breaking free, not by fighting the patterns, but by understanding why they exist and what they're trying to tell you. Consider how this shows up in small daily habits, like procrastinating on tasks that remind you of past criticisms, or feeling a surge of anxiety when faced with success because it might bring unwanted attention or expectations. These aren't random quirks, they're echoes of old fears that have been internalized over years. For instance, if you grew up in a home where mistakes were harshly punished, you might now avoid taking risks altogether, leading to a life that feels safe but stagnant. Or if you experience neglect, you might overcompensate by always putting others first, draining your energy and leaving little for your own dreams. This unconscious programming runs deep, influencing everything from your career choices to your friendships, and it often manifests as a general lack of drive because the underlying message is that it's safer to stay small and unseen. But here's the key insight. When a spiritual awakening disrupts this programming, it doesn't erase your motivation. It exposes the faulty wiring that was driving you all along. You start to see that what you thought was laziness or apathy is actually a protective mechanism, a way your mind has found to avoid re-experiencing old pains. This realization can be both unsettling and liberating, as it means you're not broken, you're just responding to hidden commands from your past. By gently exploring these patterns, perhaps through reflection or talking with someone you trust, you can begin to rewrite those old scripts. It's not about blaming your childhood or anyone else. It's about taking responsibility for your healing and slowly building a new narrative where motivation comes from a place of genuine desire, not fear. This process requires patience and self-compassion, as old habits don't change overnight, but each small awareness brings you closer to a life where you feel truly alive and driven by what matters to you, not by the ghosts of yesterday. So what happens when you start to face these truths head-on? It often feels like walking through a fog that slowly lifts, revealing landscapes you never knew were there. This is where the real work begins. Not in chasing motivation, but in listening to what your lack of drive is trying to say. You might notice moments of resistance, where old habits pull you back into familiar comforts, like scrolling endlessly online or numbing yourself with busy work. These aren't signs of failure. They're reminders that change is uncomfortable, and your mind is wired to avoid pain. Freud pointed out that our unconscious defenses, like denial or projection, keep us from seeing the full picture. But when we peel back those layers, we find the raw emotions underneath. For instance, think of someone like David, who, after his awakening, started to feel a deep sadness he couldn't explain. Instead of pushing it away, he sat with it and realized it was grief for the childhood he never had, where he was always told to be strong and never cry. Or consider Mia, who found herself avoiding social events after her spiritual experience, not out of shyness, but because she was finally acknowledging how lonely she felt in crowds, a feeling that traced back to being overlooked as a girl. These realizations can be painful, but they're essential for healing. As you allow yourself to feel these emotions without judgment, you start to dissolve the guilt and shame that have been weighing you down. This isn't about finding quick fixes or positive thinking. It's about embracing the messiness of being human and understanding that your motivation didn't disappear. It was buried under layers of unmet needs and unspoken fears. By giving voice to those silent parts, you begin to reclaim your energy and find a new sense of purpose that feels more authentic and lasting. This process often unfolds in waves. Some days you might feel clear and inspired, while other days the old numbness returns, making it hard to get out of bed. That's normal. It's your psyche's way of integrating new insights slowly, so you don't get overwhelmed. You might start to see connections between your current struggles and past events you had forgotten, like how a critical comment from a teacher years ago still makes you hesitate to share your ideas today. Or how the constant pressure to achieve in your family left you with a fear of failure that now paralyzes you when opportunities arise. These aren't just random thoughts, they are threads in the tapestry of your unconscious, woven from experiences that shaped your sense of self. As you untangle them, you might feel a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that you're finally understanding yourself, and sorrow for the pain you've carried alone. But this sorrow isn't something to run from. It's a testament to your resilience, a sign that you're ready to heal. In this space, motivation begins to shift from something you have to force to something that emerges naturally when you're aligned with your true desires. It's not about willpower, it's about willingness, to be vulnerable, to ask for help, and to accept that healing isn't linear. You might find that simple acts, like writing down your feelings or talking to a trusted friend, can open doors to parts of yourself you've ignored. Over time, this inner work can lead to profound changes, like feeling more present in your relationships or finding joy in activities that once felt like chores. Remember, this isn't about becoming a new person overnight. It's about coming home to who you've always been, beneath the layers of conditioning and fear. And as you do, you'll discover that the motivation you thought was dead was never gone. It was just waiting for you to listen. Now, as you move deeper into this process, you might wonder how to sustain this newfound awareness without falling back into old traps. It's common to experience moments of doubt where the clarity fades and the old numbness creeps in, making you question if any of this is worth it. But this isn't a setback. It's part of the natural rhythm of healing, where progress isn't always linear. Freud often spoke of how the unconscious resists change because it's familiar, even if it's painful. You might find yourself slipping into behaviors that once provided comfort, like overworking to avoid feelings or isolating yourself when things get too real. These aren't failures. They're opportunities to practice self-compassion and remind yourself that healing takes time. For example, imagine someone like Olivia, who, after starting to face her emotions, had days where she felt overwhelmed and reverted to binge-watching shows to escape. Instead of criticizing herself, she learned to see it as a signal that she needed rest, not punishment. Or think of William, who noticed that when he felt insecure, he'd seek validation from others, just as he did as a boy trying to win his father's approval. By recognizing these patterns, he could pause and ask himself what he truly needed in that moment, rather than reacting automatically. This kind of self-reflection helps you build a stronger connection with your inner world, where motivation isn't something you chase, but something that grows from understanding and acceptance. As you continue, you'll likely notice that the highs and lows become less extreme, and you develop a steadier sense of self that isn't so easily shaken by external events. This is where the real transformation happens, not in eliminating pain, but in learning to live with it in a way that doesn't control you. It's like learning to dance with your shadows instead of fighting them. You start to see that every relapse into old habits is a chance to deepen your understanding. Perhaps you'll catch yourself in a moment of procrastination and realize it's not laziness, but a fear of being judged for not being perfect, a fear that dates back to childhood when mistakes felt like disasters. Or you might feel a surge of anxiety before a social gathering and trace it to early experiences of feeling out of place or rejected. These insights don't come all at once, they unfold gradually, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. Each time you acknowledge a pattern without judgment, you weaken its hold on you. This isn't about achieving some idealized state of constant motivation. It's about cultivating a gentle curiosity toward your own mind. You might start to notice small shifts, like feeling more patient with yourself when you're not productive, or finding it easier to set boundaries because you understand where your limits come from. Over time, this builds a foundation of self-trust that makes it safer to take risks and pursue what genuinely matters to you. Remember, the goal isn't to never feel unmotivated again. It's to have a kinder relationship with those moments, seeing them as invitations to listen rather than as failures. In this space, you might discover that your spiritual awakening didn't kill your motivation. It simply cleared away the noise, allowing you to hear the quiet, persistent voice of your true self. And as you learn to trust that voice, you'll find that motivation returns, not as a force you have to muster, but as a natural expression of who you are when you're no longer held back by fear. This journey is deeply personal and unique to you, filled with ups and downs, but each step brings you closer to a life where you feel more whole, more connected, and more alive in ways you might never have imagined possible. In the end, this journey isn't about fixing yourself or reaching some final state of enlightenment. It's about learning to live with the complexities of your own mind, embracing both the light and the shadows without judgment. You might look back and see how your spiritual awakening, rather than killing your motivation, served as a wake-up call to address the deep-seated wounds that were silently draining your energy. Freud's wisdom reminds us that true freedom comes from this honest self-exploration, where we stop running from our past and start integrating it into who we are today. As you move forward, remember that motivation isn't a constant force. It ebbs and flows, and that's perfectly human. What matters is that you've begun to understand the roots of your struggles, and in doing so, you've opened the door to a more authentic way of living. This isn't a conclusion, but a new beginning, one where you can approach life with more compassion, clarity, and a deeper connection to your true desires. Think about how this shift might change your daily life. Instead of forcing yourself to be productive, you might start listening to what your body and mind truly need in each moment. Perhaps you'll find that on days when motivation is low, it's not a sign of failure, but an invitation to rest, reflect, or address something you've been avoiding. For example, consider someone like Joseph, who used to push through exhaustion until he burned out, but now he recognizes those feelings as echoes of childhood pressures to always perform. By honoring his need for breaks, he discovered a more sustainable rhythm that actually enhanced his creativity in the long run. Or imagine a woman like Carol, who spent years seeking external validation through her career, only to feel empty after promotions. After her awakening, she learned to connect with her inner values, finding motivation in projects that aligned with her personal truth, even if they seemed less impressive to others. These stories show that when you stop fighting your lack of drive and start exploring its origins, you can transform it from a source of guilt into a guide for genuine growth. This process isn't quick or easy. It requires patience and a willingness to sit with discomfort. You might have moments where old patterns resurface, like feeling guilty for not meeting societal expectations or comparing yourself to others who seem more driven. But each time you catch yourself in these thoughts, you have a chance to practice self-compassion and remind yourself that your worth isn't tied to your productivity. Freud's ideas about the unconscious highlight that these struggles are often rooted in early experiences where you learn to equate being busy with being valuable. By uncovering those beliefs, you can slowly rewrite them, allowing motivation to emerge from a place of inner alignment rather than external pressure. As you continue on this path, you'll likely notice that the highs and lows of motivation become less dramatic, and you develop a steadier, more resilient sense of self. This doesn't mean you'll never feel unmotivated again, but you'll have the tools to navigate those times with kindness and curiosity, seeing them as opportunities for deeper self-understanding. Ultimately, this journey leads to a life where you feel more whole and connected, not because you've eliminated all challenges, but because you've learned to embrace them as part of your human experience. And in that space, you'll find that the motivation you thought was lost was always within you, waiting to be rediscovered in a more honest and sustainable form. Have you ever felt that your spiritual experiences led to a loss of drive? And how has understanding your unconscious helped you find your way back? If this video resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more insights into the human mind.